Welcome to the first dawn of the new year. Happy New Year, Bonane. So, the topic for discussion on this great day, on this great morning, with this resplendent morning. So, we are going to have a discussion right now on Superman. The great topic, most of the times we have already discussed, but the things are there. We are taking it from aphorisms, thoughts and aphorisms of Sri Aurobindo. So this is a great topic we are going to discuss right now. Already we have a couple of occasions we have discussed and quoted to some extent. Anyway, Sri Aurobindo in the aphorism number 139, Sri Aurobindo questions, who is Superman? Who is Superman? I already know for mind is man, and Sri Aurobindo course supermind is Superman. Anyway, Sri Aurobindo's first question is, who is Superman? Who he who can rise above this matter regarding broken mental human unit. He who can rise above the mind. Who can rise above this matter regarding broken mental human unit and possess himself universalized and deified in a divine force, a divine love and joy, a divine knowledge. So these are the characteristics we must find. He must, of course, rise above this matter regarding a broken mental human unit. First one. Second, possess himself universalized and deified in a divine force, divine love and joy, and divine knowledge. Definitely, these three things must be there: divine force, divine love and joy, and divine knowledge. That definitely it must be there. Again, Sri Aurobindo quotes that if thou keepest this limited human ego, if you possess and keep and sustain, if you keepest this limited human ego and thinkst thyself the Superman, thou art but a fool of thy own pride. Full of thy own pride and the plaything of thy own force, the instrument of your own illusion. So again, three things you cost. Now you still in the quoted. Definitely, you must be get rid. You must be ahead of this ego. No ego should be there in you. It must not possess you. So if you feel that I keepest the limited human ego and thinkest thyself to the Superman, then what will really the outcome? Thou art but a fool of your own pride, plaything of your own force, and instrument of your own illusion. That's what Sri Aurobindo has characteristically quoted. Though naturally, you must get rid of ego. Again, the Sri Aurobindo course, Nietzsche, of course, he visualized the Superman, Sri Aurobindo, and we will compare with Sri Aurobindo Superman and Nietzsche Superman. This saw the Superman as the lion soul passing out of the camel hood. Lion soul passing out of the camel hood, but the true heraldic device and the token of the Superman is lion seated upon the camel. Two things there, but actually Nietzsche saw in different manner that lion soul passing out of the camel hood, but really it is lion seated upon the camel which stands above the cow of plenty. So good of good things, seated lion seated upon the camel which stands upon the cow of plenty. So naturally, what is the suggestion and what reality for us? If thou canst be the slave of all mankind, thou art not fit for the master. So just imagine how Sri Aurobindo quotes here, if thou canst be the slave of mankind, so thou canst are not fit to be the master. And if thou canst make thy nature as Vasishta's cow of plenty with all mankind to draw the wish from the uders, then what avails thy leonine superman manhood? So naturally, these are the conditions. Lion seated upon the camel, which stands above the cow of plenty. Then again, Sri Aurobindo quotes, "If thou canst be the slave of all humankind, that egoism must not be there, and your service like a slave of the all humankind. Thou art not fit to be the master. If you are not a slave, not to fit for to be master." And again, if thou canst not make the nature as Vasishta's cow of plenty, Vasishta we know, Vasishta's cow of plenty, so naturally what regard with all mankind to draw its wish from from her orders, so naturally what avails thy leonine supermanhood? You have to be like Vasishta's cow of plenty, and you must be devoid of ego. Third thing, and third thing, you must be the slave of mankind before being fit for the master. So Nietzsche and Sri Aurobindo's view is differentiated, is getting differentiated, and Sri Aurobindo having a upper behold, he looks in a superior manner, and from the superior plenitude, of course, about the existence and some possibility of the Superman. Again, Sri Aurobindo quotes, "Be to the world as the lion in fearlessness," number one, lion in fearlessness and lordship. Then, second, camel in patience and service, and the cow, of course, in quiet and forbearing maternal beneficence. Beneficence. Three things Sri Aurobindo quotes: if be as the lion in fearlessness and lordship. Second, camel, like a camel, Sri Aurobindo quotes in patience and service, and then third, quiet forbearing and material beneficence like the cow. Raven all thy joys of God as a lion over its prey. Raven in on all the joys of God as a lion over its prey. But now bring also, what is the suggestion? All humanity into the infinity field of luxurious ecstasy, to wallow there and to posture. So naturally, you have got your devotion, you have got your responsibility, and you have got your benevolence. That's what you have to do. So what about the three things? You have to be possess the characteristics of the lion, camel, and cow, of course. Then raven all the joys of God as a lion over its prey. Second, but bring also all humanity into the infinity field of luxurious ecstasy to allow, and there and to posture also. So again, we are crossing little bit forward about Sri Aurobindo's couple of lines only. We'll try to listen. He alone is a Superman who most manifest the highest nature of Godhead in humanity. Who most manifest the highest nature of Godhead in humanity. Again, the appearance of the Superman in the human world will be the fulfillment of his divine promise. Appearance of the Superman in the material human world will be the fulfillment of his divine promise. Again, Superman who is not the man climbed to his own natural zenith. It is totally different. You have to take care of no ego. The characteristics of the lion, cow, and the camel, it must be there, and of course nothing like climbing to the zenith. It is something else that you must know. And to be Superman, you must be devoid of ego. Not it needs the race, not a individual human being. Even the most auspicious god or avatar is also can't fulfill the condition. So again, we are going to 136 aphorism number 136. Why thy mind and thy body in pain? Here in the questions, and of course tries to get the answer. Why your mind and body are in pain? Because thy soul behind the veil wishes for the pain or takes delight in it. Very interesting. Why there is a pain in your mind and the body? And same time Sri in the course, soul behind the veil. Naturally, soul is behind the veil. It has to come out, dominate, and make the mind, life, and body its own instruments. But now he is veiled. Wishes for the pain or take delight in it. But if thou wilt, and perseverest in thy will, thou canst impose the Spirit's law of unmixed delight. The law of the Spirit is unmixed delight, of course, and on the lower members. If you live in Spirit, perseverest in thy will, thou canst impose the Spirit's law of unmixed delight. Spirit's law of unmixed delight on thy lower members. Then again we are crossing forward, we are living, we are moving one step forward. There is no iron or ineffable law. There is no iron or ineffable law that given contact shall create pain or pleasure. There is nothing like that law. So we must take care. No iron or ineffable law that a given contact shall create pain or pleasure. It is the way of soul meets the rasa or pleasure of the Brahman upon the members from outside them that determines either reaction. So everything definitely, and we must know that everything is the decision of the soul. Again we can go forward. The force of soul in the meeting, the same force from outside can't harmonize the measures of the contact and values in mind experience or body experience, so it can't be met. The force of soul in the meeting the same force from outside, from same force, inside force, that is soul of force of soul, meeting the same force from outside can't harmonize the measure of the contact in values of the mind experience or body experience. Therefore thou hast pain, grief, and of course uneasiness. So naturally, we feel here the great thing, because there is a imbalance, lack of balance, lack of correlation from outside and from the force of the soul. So for that, actually, pain, grief, and uneasiness is coming. If thou canst learn to adjust the replies of the force in thyself, if unable to reply the adjust the replies of the force in thyself to the question of the world force, that is what Sri Aurobindo question, world force, to be answered with the force from the soul, thou shalt find pain becoming pleasurable and turning into the pure delightfulness. If thou canst learn how to adjust between bringing harmony between two soul forces and outside forces, then definitely will find pain becoming the pleasurable and turning to pure delightfulness. Right relation is the condition of blissfulness. Right relation is the condition of blissfulness. Rhythm, the key of Ananda. So naturally, it is a great thing, great term, and Sri Aurobindo has quoted for this transformation, because that harmony or adjustment or in that is necessary. So right relation is the condition of right blissfulness. Rhythm, the key of course, Ananda. Again, we are moving forward. That another part of the discussion in aphorism 143. In art service but to imitate nature. If art service is but to imitate nature, then burn all the picture galleries and let us have instead the photographic studios. So Sri Aurobindo quotes about the art, service of art. If it is to imitate nature, then Sri Aurobindo quotes, you just burn all the art picture galleries and let us have instead a photographic studios. So it is not the, because purpose is different. It is because art reveals what is the real purpose of art, reveals what nature hides. That a small picture is worth more than all the jewels of the millionaires and the treasuries of the philosophy. That is a beautiful comparison between art and of course to film studio, photographic studio. The real purpose of art is that reveals the nature, that reveals what nature hides. In most of the cases, nature hides everything, and art, of course, it reveals them what is really hidden in by the nature. That a small picture is worth more than all the jewels of the millionaires and the treasuries of the princess, because it reveals what really the nature hides. Again, we can find if you only imitate visible nature, that's what people blindly accept or wrongly presume. And if you only imitate visible nature, you will be you will be perpetrate either a corpse or a dead sketch or a actual monstrosity. So really, where is the truth? Truth lives in that which goes behind and beyond the visible and the sensible. Because most of the time we find our visions are settled on the surface only. That's what we find a little, but we think we know the whole. But thing is that truth lives not only on the surface or visible nature, but truly it which goes beyond and behind the visible and the sensible. Again, Sri Aurobindo has having a bright description here. O poet, O artist, if thou but holdst up the mirror to nature, if you are in the course, if thou but holdst up the mirror of to nature, thinkest thou nature will rejoice in the world? Nature just who then what? Rather she will turn away her face. If you go in your characteristic method in the similar way, then nature will turn away from her face. For what dost thou hold up to her there? Because it is hiding, it is turning away. Then what you are going to tell herself? No. But the lifeless outline in and a reflection. That's what we can find. Lifeless outline and a reflection. A shadowy. Still in the quotes, a shadowy mimicry. So it is the secret soul of nature. That's what Sri Aurobindo wants to clarify and, of course, to convince us. It is the secret soul of nature that has to cease. Thou hast to haunt eternally after the truth of the external symbol, and no mirror will be hold for thee, not for the nor for her whom thou seekest. So definitely one thing is very clear from this aphorism: you have to grow deep inside, not to stay on the surface like this. Again, I find in Shakespeare that great description and all. I find in Shakespeare a far greater and more consistent universalist than Greeks. There is a big comparison between Greeks and this Shakespeare. Here in the course, Shakespeare feels Shakespeare, of course, superior. I find in Shakespeare a far and more consistent universalist than the Greeks. All his creations are universal types from Lancelot, Gobbo, and his dug up to the Lear and Hamlet. You read there, this is like a spiritual journey. See, you could read sequentially in step by step, very deep, immanently, very clearly will find it is a spiritual journey, and more consistency and far greater and more consistent universality you can find in Shakespeare's writings than that comparing those counterparts of the Greek. Again, the Greeks sought universality by omitting all finer individual touches, because here in the course and this, of course, describes about the art. The Greeks sought universality by omitting all finer individual touches, but Shakespeare sought it more successfully by universalizing the rarest individual details of the character. That's what the difference between the Greeks and the Shakespeare. Again, that which nature uses for concealing from us is the infinity. That which nature uses for concealing from us the infinity, Shakespeare used the revealing. That nature tries, the characteristic of the nature, it tries to hide, but Shakespeare conceal. So Shakespeare tries to reveal the Ananta Guna in man to the eye of humanity. That is the difference. For that, actually, he is really great, and you can find the greatness. Shakespeare, again, who invented the figure of holding up the mirror to the nature, was one poet who never, of course, condescended to a copy, a photograph, or a shadow, because he came forward, he tried to reveal the things what nature really hides. The reader who sees in Falstaff, Macbeth like this, Lear or Hamlet, imitations of nature, his earlier has either no inner eye of the soul or has been hypnotized by a formula. That's what's here in the course in every writings, poem, and of course you can find from Shakespeare, even starting from Falstaff, Macbeth, Lear, Hamlet, etc. You suppose you find that imitations means you are staying on the surface, you have not gone into the in-depth description or study is not there, you have not been hypnotized by a formula like this. Against your in the course, where in the material nature wilt thou find Falstaff, Macbeth, or Lear? In material nature, very difficult. Shadow and hints of them she possesses by, they themselves tower above her. So, humanity, you have to go deep, in depth into the Shakespeare's writings like Macbeth, Lear, Falstaff, like this. So again, we can find towards the end we can find there are two for whom there is a hope. The man so quotes about the two. There are two for whom there is hope. For two there is hope for only two. The man who has felt God's touch has drawn to it the skeptical seeker or self-convinced atheist. Second one, actually, is here in the course actually about the two persons. Number one, two for whom there is scope, there is hope. Now, number one is the man who has felt God's touch and has drawn to it, and the skeptical seeker or self-convinced atheists. So again, we can, but for the formularists of the all the religion, and of course parrots of the free thought, they are dead souls to who follow the death that they call a living. So these are the two definitions. I will try to quote it again. There are two for whom there is a hope: a man who has felt God's touch and has been drawn unto the the skeptical, number one, and number two is the skeptical seeker and the self-convinced atheist. Again, there is a beautiful correlation by S.T. Aurobindo. But for the formularists of the all religion and the parents of free thought, they are dead souls who follow a death that they call death that they call living. So that is the point of discussion right now. So here it is time to stop, and again we'll go for the next one in the next discussion in our next aphorism we'll take in the next discussion. For now we'll stop here. Vande Mataram.